How did you two come about working together?
That's a great
brought
question.
together?
Punisher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Timmy. Well, it was actually the Tim's covers for the comic that Marvel sent me after I'd turned down the role a couple of times. I said it's just the superhero thing. I mean, it's fun for some people, but I wasn't a fan. But then they sent me the Bradstreet covers to the book, and they had such a gritty, realistic feel to them. And I said, well, if we could do something like that, that would be terrific. And then from my end, I asked them if they would want to do a special poster just for Comic Con by Tim as me as the Punisher, which they agreed to. And so we set up a little photo shoot in Santa Monica. I guess they brought you up from San Diego, right?
Mm-hmm.
Were you still living down there?
Yeah.
And we got together at a little photo shoot house in Santa Monica, and that's when Tim and I first met, and we just hit it off instantly and just became really good friends.
Yeah, it's funny too because when I first found out there was going to be a Punisher movie, I wanted to be a part of it, and I knew that Gail Ann Hurd was producing it, and I'm a longtime fan of Gail's work, and I was like, how do I get involved with this? So I got a hold of the only person that I thought might get me in touch with Gail Ann Hurd, which was Frank Darabont. And Darabont said, I'll do you one better. I'll introduce you to her husband. Her and Jonathan Hensley, who's directing the movie, by the way, are dear friends of mine. So he called Jonathan Hensley, and John called me, and we talked about doing all kinds of stuff, me doing all kinds of stuff on the film, conceptually, and like just being a big part of it. And when it came time, and I gave him the idea for the whole teaser trailer, and when it came time to do the movie, Jonathan said, I can't hire you. And I said, why? And he said, well, Marvel says they own all these covers. What do we need you for? And I said, oh, well, how disappointing. And so I called Ari Arad, one of the producers, and I said, designing the Punisher is the last thing I was going to do on that movie. That's done. There was a lot of other things I said, but I said, what you should think about is, at the very least, is I would love to do a teaser poster for the film, like I do the covers, but with Thomas Jane instead of my Punisher model. And so that was going on while Tom was advocating for me, which is just strange. And Ari said something like, well, yeah, we'll keep that in mind. Thanks, Tim. And I didn't know Ari at the time necessarily. And so I think a month or two went by, and then he emailed me out of the blue, and he goes, I got a terrific idea. We'd love for you to do posters for that.
And Comic-Con.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, they were also doing posters for the movie, and they were just terrible. And when we went through them, everybody just rejected these realistic posters of me and John Travolta.
Photoshop heads,
But then Tim had done some work too, and Tim's Tim's poster work ended up being the poster for the film itself.
Yeah, they took, well, yeah, we ended up doing 5 teaser posters and doing some big release at Comic Con, and then they hired me to do the theatricals.
So then when I was doing press in San Diego, I got together with Tim, and I pitched him this idea I had for a comic, and that turned out to be Bad Planet. Tim hooked me up with Steve Niles, who taught me how to write for comics, and we formed a company together, me and Tim and Steve, called Raw Studios, and we're still at it today. We just put out a book called Dark Country, which we brought some copies here, and that was a graphic novel adaptation of the movie that we did. And Thomas Ott, who I've always been a big fan of, I got in touch with him, and I actually was in Paris, and we went out to dinner, and I pitched him this idea, and Thomas agreed to do the graphic novel. And then we're also working on a werewolf book with another native son, Sean O'Connor, who's from London, and we've just kind of kept at it, doing our boutique comic book stuff and having a lot of fun. Very low output, but high quality.
Yeah, it's more of a boutique kind of like, we're not in it to put out like a line of comic books. We're in it to develop and nurture our own kind of projects. And it's interesting that Tom was not interested in doing a superhero when they offered him the Punisher, because he's a lifelong comic collector. More while I think your proclivity was more for the undergrounds and the old EC comic books and things of that nature. So I guess on that level, I can see why superheroes weren't something that was jumping out at you.
Yeah, I just personally never really got into it.
Couldn't see yourself walking around in a spandex costume, yeah?
It's too bad. I could have been a lot richer. I did.
When you're writing, are you influenced by the style of how Tim draws, or are you influenced when you draw how the writing is approached? How does this work together? Do you write a piece at a time and then draw? Or
we have a simpatico, Tom and I do, and I don't know whether it's we're near the same age and from the same part of the country, and we grew up with the same stuff. But he turns me on to stuff that I was never into. But I don't know if that goes both ways. Mm-hmm. But Tom is. I always say that Tom's kind of my muse in a way, like with covers, because he's such a chameleon as an actor. He's done posed for Nick Fury for me. He's been El Borak, Robert E. Howard's El Borak. He's Cal McDonald, and I'll. Because I shoot a lot of photos of him here and there, or on movie projects, I end up, using that stuff, in my own work. Mm-hmm. And so he's kind of my De Niro if I was Scorsese, But I think he trusts my sensibilities too, with Raw Studios, I do all the ad design, all the art direction and stuff like that, and he does as well.
He lays out the books and does all the art direction inside all the books,
Well, he does a lot of it too. I mean, he's very hands-on with the artists. He's an artist too, and he's a creator, and part of that creation is working on all those levels in the development of something. And
I'm an artist who can't draw.
He designed our Bad Planet logo, though.
Uh-huh.
Guys, tell us a bit more about Dark Country for people who haven't seen it yet, and what is it about the comic book world that's so appealing?
I don't know. I think graphic novels are just so imaginative, and I love the fact that they're a indigenously American art form. That they're that it's so relatively new. The paper canvas is it's as imaginative as you want to get. Any kind of story you can tell, you can do through comics. You can, the Bad Planet story that we did, if you did that as a movie, it would be a $400 million film, they're novels with pictures. They can be poetry, they can be sublime, they can tell small, intimate stories, or they can be, they can encompass multiple universes. It's a really amazing canvas, and you see with shows like this, you see the breadth and the depth of just how varied all that imaginative world is, and there's an audience for whatever you can create in that world. It's very specific, it's there's so many different styles of art, from Frank Miller to Wally Wood, to Arendo, to Bradstreet. There's just so much. There's so much that you can do with that world visually, that it's always just held a fascination for me in terms of story, and the marriage of art and story is something that is also it creates its own mystique in a way. The artist that you choose to tell the story is sort of that paints the palette of the kind of world that you're going to enter. You can tell so much without words, and then And then, of course, you can have fantastic writing. That's there's comic books out there that are as well written as any novel, with all the sublime and poetry, and so it's really captivating, and it's always captivated my imagination, and I try to stay open to all different styles, and kind of get into all different kinds of. Like Tim said, I'm a big fan of the underground comics that started in the '60s, but then I also like really cartoony stuff, and then more of the. Tim and I lean toward a sort of the more realistic, illustrative style of book, but then we work with somebody like Thomas Ott, who does scratchboard. He takes a black sheet of paper and he scratches the white into the paper, and that's amazing and unique. And
the thing too with comics is, as a creator, there is, with a film project, you have to you have to raise money. There's a budget. There are all these limitations. There's all these spokes in the wheel. All these facets you have to work with to be able to make that thing happen. And along the way, your vision oftentimes is watered down and homogenized and focus grouped and, suited, as I like to call it. And in comics, your only limitation is your time and your imagination. And it's like Tom said, you can do a small, intimate story that if you were, and very often if I do sequential, I stage it as a play and I photograph it. And then I work from those photos to create the stylized artwork. And that can be a bit of a production. But comics can be the small, intimate thing up to something that could be a $400 million film, a Pacific Rim, and that's the magic of it. You don't need anyone but yourself, really, and then figure out a way to publish it. And today, you just kickstart that thing, right? As long as you can get enough people interested in it, you can get it out there. Or you could go to someone like Image, who if they think your book is worth it, will publish that book for you. And I think that's pretty amazing.
Well, you're also working with a lot of different artists, even if you're making a book, and then that way it's a great practice for movies, because you're still working with a colorist and a letterer and the penciler and the inker and the printer, and then all those things have corollaries to film. And if you're organizing all of that, you're working with all these different people to bring a specific vision to life. And I think it's great practice for making movies.
There's no great stretch there. You're doing the same thing in a different venue.
So for me, it's great training as a director. Tim and I are working on a couple of movies too. And I wrote a Western last year. We're going to hopefully shoot it in the spring. But that's that experience in getting into films is just a direct result of working on these comics and sort of learning the ropes that way. It's sort of like the producerial side of creativity, which you have to have.
It gives you confidence too, because it starts out as something that you're not maybe so sure about, but once you've been through the ropes with putting together a book like that, you kind of see that I think I can work with these other facets and make that happen. And Raw too is a company that's not just a comic company. It's we're developing, like Tom said, film. Tom produced an album last year for Rusty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we made an EP for Rusty Blades.
And so it's like whatever kind of like creative format we're into, we try to make it happen and put it out there. And that's exciting, There's no limitation, it's not just one type of thing.
You mentioned you're working on various movies at the moment. Can you give us a little bit of a tease about what kind of thing they are, what kind of genre, what kind of subject, who might be involved, that sort of thing?
Well, we got the Western. That's
the farthest along.
That's the furthest along. We've got a great cast, and
Nick Nolte.
We've got Nick, and we've got some other terrific actors come on board for that. and we're working on our other project is sort of a hard-boiled kind of the in the vein of the old Donald Westlake novels, sort of one of those hard-boiled style stories. Phil Joannou, who directed Dirty Laundry, and I are working on a project, a miniseries. So we're putting that together. Our book, The Lichen, which is sort of like the Magnificent Seven, and set in the 1700s, it's hunting werewolves.
A period werewolf.
Werewolf story that Mike Carey, who's also from England, wrote for us. That's our first project that we deliberately started out to make a comic book and then turn that into a film. So we're really proud of that. We have Sean O'Connor doing the art, also from England. We're working with a lot of Brits.
A lot of talent over here.
A lot of talent.
To ask about the Western with Nick Nolte, what kind of period are we talking, and what can you flesh a bit out the rest of the
Western
cast and stuff?
takes place in the 1870s, and it's a bit of a hero's journey. It's a bit of a treasure of the Sierra Madre. It's very much a classic Western.
Gothic.
More in the there's definitely a sort of almost a Gothic element.
Homerian.
It's a hero's journey, kind of a Homerian kind of a tale.
There's a lot of little elements in it that make it it's a mythical kind of experience, a road picture kind of, if you will, a saddle picture.
There's
With
treasure,
some great characters,
Indians, and buried treasure. It's called A Magnificent Death from a Shattered Hand. And
it's a mouthful.
That was actually a submission a young writer submitted a script with that title to us, and we try to read. We get a lot of submissions every week, and we try to read as much as we can. But that title sort of stood out, and the story was really, really cool. So we optioned the screenplay from a guy named Jose Prendas, who wrote the original draft. And I worked on it for about a year and whipped it into shape. And it turned out great. It's very much a throwback Western in the vein of Howard Hawks and John Ford. I know everybody sort of wants to do the spaghetti Western type thing, and there's elements of that in this Western for sure. But I think for a Western to be successful, you have to go back to the roots of what made Westerns so interesting in the first place. And I think a lot of the modern Westerns try to modernize the Western tale, and they have not been successful. But if you stick to the basics, like Unforgiven, I guess that's really the most recent Western that I can think of that really did well. The two films that I think you could compare this Western to would be There Will Be Blood and No Country for Old Men.